Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Is Essential podcast. I'm Donald Rainwater. I'll be your host, and we are going to talk about issues and candidates that affect the state of Indiana and its 92 counties. And we're going to look at things from a libertarian perspective, something a little different that a lot of people don't normally get to hear. I think it's important that we look at and talk about things from the perspective of protecting individual rights and promoting a return to the constitutionally limited government that the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the state of Indiana outline. So that is going to be the purpose of our podcasts and our discussions. This is episode 1. Throughout these podcasts, we are going to take a serious look at issues around the state of Indiana, but we're also going to take the time to hopefully educate, inform, and maybe entertain a little bit. We're going to, from time to time, interview folks here in the state of Indiana who have a different perspective on issues than what you might hear on radio or television, and give people the opportunity to have an honest conversation about what's going on here in the state of Indiana as it relates to your individual rights and to government the way that it should be, not necessarily the way that it is. So we're going to start out this morning, this afternoon, whatever time you happen to be listening, by talking about the Liberty Is Essential PAC and what it is and why it exists, and how it can have a positive effect on what it is that I believe needs to happen in the state of Indiana. So first of all, the Liberty Is Essential PAC. PAC stands for Political Action Committee. So it is a political organization organized in the state of Indiana. It was founded by me in order to be able to move forward with the critical work that is necessary in the state of Indiana to continue to protect individual rights and promote that return to constitutionally limited government, both at the state level, but also at the local, municipal, if you will, and the county level. Because as is famously the cliche, all politics is local, and everything starts and ends with what happens in your city, your town, your county. Those are the things that most directly affect you on a daily basis, whether it be your property taxes or your personal income tax. All these things come back down to the local level. And so one of the things that Liberty Is Essential PAC and I are focused on is identifying bad government at the local level, at the county level, and looking for opportunities to support both better local legislation at the town council, city council, county council level, or better government administration with a mayor or a group of county commissioners, and supporting candidates who both agree with the idea of constitutionally limited government and the protection of individual rights. The fact that the individual is more important than the collective. One of the things that we see all too often today is the idea that we are supposed to sacrifice our individual rights for the public good. And while we are supposed to be concerned with the public good, I don't believe that the founders, Jefferson, Madison, ever intended for the individual to sacrifice their inalienable rights for a good of the collective. I believe that just in contrast to that, they believed that the individual's rights being protected was to the benefit of the whole, and that it was important that our structure of government reflect that. So those are the types of things that Liberty Is Essential PAC seeks to do, is find both the legislative issues at every level of government, from municipal up through the Indiana General Assembly, and the candidates necessary to ensure that those legislative agendas are consistent with both the Constitution of the United States and the State of Indiana Constitution. And from time to time during the podcast, we're going to look at the articles and the sections of the Indiana State Constitution and kind of break those down and talk about what they mean on a practical basis. Because all too often, I think what we have is this theoretical idea of what is or is not constitutional. But we don't talk about the practical common sense application of constitutionality, whether it be from the state constitution or the federal constitution, within our everyday lives. And I think that's very important, because all too often I believe that government in its current state and the mainstream media will try to influence what you believe, what we believe is the function of government, whether it's consistent with the Constitution of the state of Indiana or the federal Constitution or not. And here again, all too often, it's the idea of the social collective being more important than the rights of the individual. And this is something that I firmly believe that we need to rein in as quickly as possible. And it's something that we can only rein in if we utilize our tools that the founding fathers have given us, and that is obviously the vote, in order to make sure that we have the representation at every level of government that represents we the people, not special interest groups or corporate interests or only the wealthy, but all citizens of the state of Indiana, and ensuring that that goes down here again to the municipal and county level. There should never be any kind of favoritism by our elected officials that puts a group above the individual. That is an artificial manipulation of government, and it's something that I believe that we need to be very, very critical of and very certain that we speak out against. And so this is really the core of the purpose of the Liberty Is Essential Political Action Committee, the political organization that I founded, and by extension, this podcast. We want to shine a very bright light on the concept of the Liberty Society, the idea of individual rights being more important than the quote-unquote public good, because here again, you can't have a public good when you trample on the individual. You cannot say that, now I'll be honest with you, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I do not believe that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I believe that you must focus on the needs of the individual in order to make sure that the needs of the many are actually protected and provided for. I believe that it's important, for example, in an era of a pandemic, that we understand the necessity of realizing that each individual is unique and that their ability to determine for themselves how to protect themselves, their household, their family members, their businesses, their schools, their places of worship, during a pandemic is something that each individual must decide for themselves. And the idea that government mandates rules in order to protect the masses is both frivolous and futile. And I think we've seen that. And so these are the types of things that we're going to talk about, we're going to look at. In the next segment, we're going to talk about a bill that I think is extremely inappropriate, and that it's important that we look at it, talk about it, speak out against it, and invite you to do the same, because if there's anything that is a mechanism for big, overblown, bad, inappropriate government, it's taxation. So we're going to be looking at House Bill 1434, which is the new cigarette and e-liquid proposed tax. And we'll talk about that in just a moment when we come back. All right, we're back, and as you notice, I have a little music in there. What we don't have yet are sponsors for our podcast, so if you know someone who would be interested and would like to have their business mentioned and have us advertise for them during our podcast, we would love to have sponsors and advertisers. That money will be used to produce not only this podcast, but also be used toward the mission of Liberty Is Essential PAC, which will allow us to further our outreach of protecting individual rights and promoting a return to constitutionally limited government here in the state of Indiana and its 92 counties. And so, as I said before we broke, we're going to talk about House Bill 1434. And there's a lot to talk about here because House Bill 1434 it's labeled a cigarette and tobacco product tax. And I'm going to read you the digest of this because I think it's important that we understand what it is that this particular bill is trying to do and why it's bad. Why in the world the idea of encouraging people to stop smoking is a bad idea in the state of Indiana. That sounds on its face to be a little counterintuitive, but once we get down into it, I think you're going to agree with me that the way they're going about this is completely and utterly not just wrong, but morally and ethically questionable. So the digest of this bill says cigarette and tobacco products tax. Now remember the term tobacco products, if you will. Increases the cigarette tax by $1 to $1.99 per pack of regular-sized cigarettes and makes a corresponding increase for larger cigarettes. Provides that revenue received from the increase in cigarette tax is deposited in the state general fund for the purpose of paying appropriations for Medicaid current obligations for provider reimbursements. Makes corresponding adjustments to the percentage of taxes deposited into other funds. Amends the definition of tobacco product to include e-liquid and an electronic cigarette. Amends the definition of wholesale price concerning tobacco products manufactured and sold in Indiana. Increases the tax on tobacco products other than moist snuff to 39% of the wholesale price of tobacco products. Now, first of all, let's talk about the idea that vaping products, electronic cigarettes, and e-liquid are being redefined as a tobacco product. I don't understand this, nor do I find it appropriate. And when I say I don't understand it, I don't mean that I need an explanation to educate me as to why this is a tobacco product. I don't understand how anybody with any common sense would consider an e-liquid or an electronic cigarette to be a tobacco product. There is no tobacco in it. Chewing tobacco, snuff, those are tobacco products. A cigar is a tobacco product. An electronic cigarette, a vaping device, and the e-liquid associated with it are not tobacco products. So this is the first place where this bill runs afoul of what I believe is appropriate. Now, last Monday, which was February 1st, I went down to the State House because the Public Health Committee in the House of Representatives held a hearing on this bill. And I wanted to speak in opposition to this bill, and I'll tell you why and what I said. I'll summarize it for you here in a few minutes. But I want to talk a little bit about how this bill was presented to the Public Health Committee, because I find this to be really important and of major concern. You see, the author of this bill is State Representative Julie Olthoff. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. It's Olthoff. And Representative Olthoff is a Republican state representative representing District 19. Or at least that's the district that she was elected to represent. I will tell you that I don't, in this case, believe that she's representing the 1% of Hoosiers that she was elected to represent. I believe that she's representing someone else. Because when she presented her bill and she was asked by other state representatives on the Public Health Committee a series of questions about her bill, including where the money that was collected by this new tax was going to be put into the state budget, she several times said, I had that question too. I don't really know. Now, if you are the author of a piece of legislation in the Indiana General Assembly, I believe you should know what your bill says, what its intent is, and you should not be answering questions from your peers or from the citizens with the statement, I don't know, I had that question too. What that tells me is someone handed her this bill and said, go present this, go introduce this into the Indiana General Assembly. She doesn't know any more about the contents of this bill than you or I, nor does she understand the ramifications or implementation of this bill any more than you or I. And evidently, it doesn't matter to her. And I say that because here again, she introduced this bill without understanding the ramifications of this bill. And I don't think it matters to her how it affects the citizens in her district or the rest of the state. Because if this bill were to become law, it would have a severely negative impact on a number of segments of the population of the state of Indiana. And let's talk about the most obvious. When you raise a tax on tobacco products, you are raising a tax on a group of people who you already know are addicted to nicotine. Now you know this because the majority of people who speak in favor of this bill at that same committee hearing were medical professionals or representatives of medical organizations who are trying to socially engineer the citizens of the state of Indiana to stop smoking by raising the cigarette tax to a level that will cause them to want to stop. But these people know that nicotine is an addictive chemical, and that when you tax an addictive chemical, you are taxing people in a predatory way. I believe that the purpose of this tax is to raise millions of dollars for the Republican supermajority in the General Assembly to spend at their will and whim from people who are addicted and who are not going to stop smoking. The stated concept that they want people to stop smoking, in my opinion, is simply a smokescreen. Because the majority of the money collected from this tax is going to the general fund. It's not going to smoking cessation programs. As a matter of fact, a very small percentage of this is earmarked for smoking cessation. The majority of it is money that they can spend however they see fit. Just like the majority of the rest of the money that they take from Hoosiers on a daily basis. But let me circle back, if I can, and mention the fact that I already used the term social engineering, and this is another reason why this is a bad bill, because government is under the impression that it's their responsibility to decide what's good for you and what's bad for you, and they believe that they can use oppressive, punitive taxation to force you to modify your behavior. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want my behavior modified by a government. I want to select for myself how I live my life, what choices I make, because the bottom line is I have to live with the consequences of my actions. I have to deal with the consequences. Government doesn't deal with the consequences of my actions. Now, they'll try to tell you that we're all affected by the consequences of people's actions because we all have to pay more for health care because of the smokers. And I'm going to tell you that that's not true. The reason that you have to pay more is because government has manipulated the health care and health care cost in a way that has artificially manipulated that entire market. Your ability to pay for health care, what health care costs you, is only reflected in other people's health care costs because of government interference and government manipulation. It would be very easy for a healthcare provider or a provider of health insurance, let's say, to make you pay more. As a matter of fact, they already do make people who smoke pay more for their health insurance than people who don't. So the idea that you pay more because someone else smokes is a misnomer. It's a manipulation of the facts in order to get you to do what they want you to do. We're back to the social engineering, the behavioral modification. And this bill is designed to force people to modify their behavior, or at least that's what it's being promoted as doing. Here again, I believe that they fully understand that the majority of smokers will not quit smoking because they raise the cigarette tax, but they will get a lot more money out of people's pockets in order to spend it as they see fit, which is, unfortunately, today, the main focus of our state government. How much money can we take from you and funnel it to our friends and our political supporters? This is what they do. It's not what they're supposed to do, but it is most definitely what they do. So this bill is bad on several levels. But here's one of the things that they don't talk about that we really need to think about when we look at this bill. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Hoosier small businesses who are struggling to survive because of the governor's inappropriate executive orders that caused businesses to have to shut down or reduce the number of hours that they are open, or not allow people to come into their business. They had to serve them at the curb. And these small businesses are suffering financially. They are economically hurting. And this bill, raising this tax, any of these small businesses that sell tobacco products, vaping products, they will be adversely affected on the bottom line. Their revenues will go down if this bill's intent is successful. If, in fact, people stop smoking because this tax goes up, all those small business owners and their employees will be adversely affected by this tax. You see, the bottom line is always the same. There are unintended consequences to everything the government does. And the stark reality is that everything we look at the government doing, we have to ask ourselves the question, do they know they're hurting us, or are they just not too smart? Mark Twain said, "Sometimes I wonder whether the world is being run by smart people who are putting us on, or by imbeciles who really mean it." And that, folks, is what we really need to figure out for ourselves when we look at the people that we have elected to represent us, and I say that with air quotes, in our state government. Because do they really believe that what they're doing benefits us? I don't know whether they do or not, but I can certainly tell you that the reality is that what they're doing hurts more people than it helps. We've seen that throughout the pandemic, and we see it with this bill. So what I'm going to ask you to do, this bill has already been voted through the Public Health Committee in the House, and it's gone on to the Ways and Means Committee. But I would have encouraged you to contact your state representative, and if you don't know how to do that, you can actually go to iga.in.gov, and when that web page pops up, over in the left-hand side, there's an information tab in the menu, and if you click on that and go down to find your legislator, it will bring up a screen that will allow you to put your address in, click search, and it will tell you who your state representative and state senator are. And it will give you the ability to call their office or send them an email. And I would strongly encourage you to send an email and make a phone call to your state representative and tell them House Bill 1434 is a predatory tax that will harm small businesses and is designed to socially re-engineer the citizens of the state of Indiana. And I don't believe that government's place is to re-engineer human behavior. I believe that government's place is to protect my individual rights. And it is my individual right to determine whether I ingest nicotine products or not. It is not government's place to try to punitively tax me into not ingesting nicotine products, whether they be tobacco or e-liquid. I find that offensive, inappropriate, and I would like for you to vote against it when it comes to the House floor. So that is House Bill 1434. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about turning our backs on the status quo here in the state of Indiana, turning our backs on establishment politics, business as usual, and what you can do in order to help us promote individual rights and a return to constitutionally limited government. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, and this is the Liberty Is Essential podcast. I'm Donald Rainwater, and we are talking about issues that specifically relate to Hoosiers, both at the local, county, and state level. That's the purpose of the podcast. We will be doing in the beginning here, one a week. This is episode 1. This is our first go round at this. We are, as I said before, looking for sponsors. We're looking for content. If there are issues at the local or county level that you are particularly interested in hearing us talk about, having us discuss, you can contact me at donald@libertyisessential.com. That's my email address. You can also go to our website at libertyisessential.com and click on the contact link, and we would love to get your messages through the contact us page. You can also go there and subscribe to our newsletter. We're going to be producing a monthly newsletter. And here again, right now we're starting with the podcast once a week. We would love to get to the place where we maybe do a daily podcast, do a weekly newsletter. We will be looking in the near future at expanding our public media outreach. We would love to be able to get the sponsorship for a weekly television show, a weekly radio show, where we can get the message out to people who maybe don't listen to podcasts. There are still some folks out there, some registered voters, that we would be able to reach with our message through the radio or through the television, and we want to look at reaching those folks. And so at this point, I'm going to mention that Liberty Is Essential PAC gets all of its funding through contributions, donations from citizens such as yourself. You can go to libertyisessential.com and click on the donate button, or you can just go to libertyisessential.us/donate and donate to the PAC. We would appreciate your sponsorship because the truth is that when you give to Liberty Is Essential PAC, you'll be partnering with me in that critical endeavor of securing life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness is defined by the individual, not the government, for all Hoosiers. And this is the work that we're doing. This is the purpose of this podcast. We want to get the word out. We want to help influence and promote individual rights and constitutionally limited government throughout the state of Indiana. And we can't do that without your help. So I would encourage you, if you can give, please do give. It is how we will be able to build this organization and expand our reach of the message that government doesn't have to be what it is. We can get it back to the limits that were put on it by both the federal Constitution and the state Constitution, and allow individuals to be free to choose their own path, their own destiny, and not have government manipulate society as it's trying to do, for example, with House Bill 1434. And so, of course, as all of you probably know, I was the Libertarian candidate for governor here in the state of Indiana during last year's gubernatorial election. And during that election, I was fortunate enough, actually, my campaign team did all the work. I just kind of showed up and talked a little bit, but our campaign team received over 344,000 votes, which is approximately 12% of the total vote in the state of Indiana for governor last year. And I tell you that not to brag, but to talk about the fact that I believe that there is an awakening in the state of Indiana around the concept of individual rights and a return to constitutionally limited government. And you're going to hear me say that phrase over and over and over, because I believe that it is the foundation of what is important in our society today, is a return to government within its limits and a focus on individual rights. And as I told you earlier, that's why I founded Liberty Is Essential PAC. And what I want to talk to you just briefly here for the next couple of minutes is the positive impact that awakening here in the state of Indiana has had on the Libertarian Party of Indiana. Over the last few months, we have seen over 20 new county affiliates established in the state of Indiana. We now have over half of the counties in the state of Indiana who are actively affiliated with the Libertarian Party of Indiana. And that's important because Hoosiers need to hear a third-party voice. We need the voice of liberty, of individual freedom, because limited government isn't being talked about, or it's definitely not being implemented by either the Republican Party in Indiana or the Democratic Party in Indiana. If you believe in limited government, right now your only choice is the Libertarian Party in Indiana. And I tell you that because I believe that it's time that the Libertarian Party stand up as that protector of individual rights and that promoter of limited government. And so if you agree with that, I encourage you to go to lpin.org and research the Libertarian Party here in Indiana. And actually, we would love to have you join us. I believe that it would be a tremendous movement here in the state of Indiana. And I believe that as the Libertarian Party grows and Hoosier citizens join the Libertarian Party and join the Liberty Movement, that it will cause the Republicans and the Democrats to stop and take notice and take inventory of where they're at and what they're doing, and can turn around what's going on in government in the state of Indiana. But if people don't stand up and stand together for individual rights and limited government, things won't change. We cannot reverse the course of our state unless we band together and work together. And so I would encourage you to look at lpin.org and consider joining the Libertarian Party here in the state of Indiana as we all move forward to continue to protect individual rights and promote constitutionally limited government here in the state of Indiana. Now, I'm going to briefly talk to you about another bill that has been introduced into the state Senate, and that's Senate Bill 168. And Senate Bill 168, to be honest with you, is of particular concern because it really is of no other purpose than to give the governor more power than he already has. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that our current governor needs any more authority, any more power, any more control than what he already has. But Senate Bill 168 is supposed to be in reference to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. And I'll read you the digest of the bill. Provides that effective January 1st, 2023, the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department is administered by a 5-member state board of police commissioners consisting of 4 members appointed by the governor and the mayor of the consolidated city. Provides that the board's powers include exercising the power, authority, and responsibility of the executive and legislative body of the consolidated city to adopt, amend, and enforce ordinances and resolutions related to the administration of the police department, serving as the merit board for the police department, and appointing a police chief for the department who is responsible only to the board. Provides that the legislative body of the Police Special Service District retains the power to modify and approve the police department's budget. Now, I understand that many, many Hoosiers are concerned about the fact that the mayor of the city of Indianapolis and the Indianapolis City Council, which are controlled by the Democrat Party here in the state of Indiana, I know that people are concerned that they're not doing their jobs and that they're not supporting the police department, and that they, by not supporting the police department, are not supporting the business owners and citizens of the city of Indianapolis. And I know that many people are concerned because the city of Indianapolis is the largest city in the state, and it is also the economic driver for the majority of what the Indiana General Assembly likes to do, which is here again, pass legislation that encourages large corporations to move here from out of state and take advantage of tax incentives that are not often provided to in-state companies. And therefore, when the city of Indianapolis suffers, the opportunity for the governor and the leadership of the Republican Party here in Indiana to benefit from corporations coming here from out of state dwindles. I get it. I understand. And they have used what has gone on in Indianapolis as a rallying cry to expand the governor's powers and to remove the voice of the people of the city of Indianapolis and their vote. Think about that for a minute. When this bill gives the authority to appoint a police chief, serve as the merit board for the police department, and adopt, amend, and enforce ordinances, resolutions, and rules related to the administration of the police department, what this bill is doing is taking the authority away from the Indianapolis City Council and the mayor of Indianapolis and giving it to the governor and his appointees. That is removing the elected officials and making the governor's appointees the wielders of power in Indianapolis and Marion County. Now, I agree wholeheartedly that there are problems in Indianapolis and they need to be solved. But if the elected officials in Indianapolis aren't doing their job, they need to be held accountable and they probably need to be replaced. But you don't replace them by giving the governor more power to appoint people to assume the role of city and county government in Indianapolis and Marion County. What you do is you create a law that allows for the elected officials to be held accountable. A recall law, for example. If the citizens of Marion County, if the business owners and the residents are unhappy with how the government is doing its job, they should be able to circulate a petition and get petition signatures that would allow for the recall of the mayor and members of the city council and to have a special election. That's what should happen, in my opinion. We should not be taking the vote away from the people. But, as we've seen over the last few years, there is no vote that the governor and his Republican Party leadership in Indiana won't strip from the citizens. The governor didn't like the situation with the superintendent of public instruction in Indiana, so he had the General Assembly take the vote from the people and convert that to a Secretary of Education that he appoints. That's taking the vote away from the people. And he's doing the same thing here. This is exactly what's being done with Senate Bill 168. They want to take the vote away from the people and give the power to the governor to appoint the leadership of Indianapolis and Marion County and basically make the mayor and the city council powerless. And if they'll do it with Indianapolis, they'll do it with anywhere else they want to do it. And as evidence of that, all we need to do is look at what the Indiana General Assembly did to take the power of the school boards away from Gary, Indiana, and Muncie, Indiana. Here again, instead of fixing the problem, they simply see it as an opportunity for more power, more authority, more control. This is absolutely contrary to the idea of a constitutionally limited government. This is government run amok. This is government wanting more and more authority and more power. And this is bad. And here again, I know that Marion County and Indianapolis have problems. But Senate Bill 168 is not the way to handle it. It's not the way to solve the problem. All it is a way for state government, for the Indiana Republican Party supermajority to get more control over the state and take more of your voice away from you. And if they'll do it in Marion County, they'll do it wherever they feel like doing it across the state of Indiana until we stand up and put a stop to it. So again, I'm going to ask you to go to iga.in.gov and click on the information menu item, go down to find your legislator, put your address in, hit search, find your state senator. They are going to look at this bill later this week, and I would encourage you strongly, next week. It'll be next week. I believe it's on the 16th of February that they will be looking at this bill in committee. I strongly encourage you, contact your state senator. Tell them, this is an inappropriate bill. It's bad for Hoosiers. It's bad for the state of Indiana because it's growing big government. It's taking the vote away from citizens. And that's not what we need in Indiana. We need better government, not bigger government. My name's Donald Rainwater, and this has been the Liberty Is Essential podcast. I encourage you to keep a lookout for episode 2. It'll be out sometime the week of February 15th. And we certainly do appreciate you taking the time to listen. And we'll see you again real soon. Have a great day.